Hello, everyone. Many thanks for joining us today. I hope you are all safe wherever you are. My name is Juliette Frieur. I am Partnerships Manager in charge of Climate and Environment Research at the AXA Research Fund, and I am truly delighted to be with you today and to host the webinar on biodiversity at risk in the context of the AXA Corporate Responsibility Week. So for those who don't know it, the AXA Research Fund was launched 12 years ago. It is a scientific philanthropy of the AXA Group, which aims at better supporting science to help decision making through science and to better respond to the challenge that we face. So far, we have been supporting 650 researchers all around the world and working on the topic of health, socio-economics, and climate and environment. So today, the same day that our CEO is speaking to the United Nations Summit for Biodiversity, we shall to focus on this particular topic, which is less known than climate change, but is really key to human life and human health in general. So at the AXA Research Fund, we understood that biodiversity is really a pressing issue, and that's why we have been supported 50 researchers working both on marine biodiversity and terrestrial biodiversity. Actually, one of them is with us today, and I am delighted to introduce Professor Dirk Schmeller. Warm welcome. Hello, Dirk.
Hi, Juliette. Thanks for your warm words.
Thank you for being with us. So, Dirk, you are Professor of Biology Conservation at the Institut National Polytechnique de Toulouse in France, and you are holding the AXA Chair for Functional Mountain Ecosystems, which aims at studying the effects of climate change, pollution, and pathogens on mountain ecosystems. So in a few minutes, we are going to learn more with you about biodiversity, its complexity, the services it provides, and especially why it is so precious and crucial for human health and human life. So just before we start the session, I'm just mentioning that our audience had the chance to ask you questions before the webinar, so we'll make sure we'll take some time to answer a few of them. And to our audience, more will be online in the upcoming days at the same link that you click to access this webinar. There is also a live tweet, so I warmly encourage you all to follow at AXA Research Fund. So Dirk, if you're ready, over to you.
Yes, thank you, Juliette. It's a great pleasure for me to be here today. Now I need to share my screen first.
Yes.
And I hope everything will work fine. You.
Yes, I can see your screen, Dirk.
Yes, but you can, but you could not. Now you can see my presentation.
Yes, that's perfect.
Yes,
thank you.
Perfect. Yeah, good day, everyone. I have the pleasure to talk to you today about something very complex, biodiversity. That in 20 minutes is quite a challenge, but I will try to give you an idea why biodiversity is at risk and what it actually means for us. First of all, I know that many of you are not experts. They are not ecologists like I am, but you come from very diverse sectors. So biodiversity, what actually is it? It's a word which is used everywhere, but it's actually referring only to the variety of life forms on Earth. So whatever life form you can imagine is part of biodiversity. And as a scientist, we are assessing it by considering the diversity of ecosystems, of species, and even genes in space and time. But also important are the interactions between these species, between genes, in the different ecosystems to understand biodiversity and its state and trends. So, what are ecosystems? Ecosystems are a variable. It's everything you know about around you. There are thousands of them around the world. The tropical forest is one ecosystem. Our temperate forests in Europe are one ecosystem, but also the taiga, the grasslands, saltwater marshes, freshwater deserts, and so on and so on. All of these are different ecosystems. And in those ecosystems, we have millions of species around the world living in those ecosystems and forming those ecosystems. And many of those species have actually not been described. We only have described scientifically 1.7 million species. But the estimation is actually more than 7.2 million species, not counting fungi, viruses, bacteria, and other microorganisms, which of course are also species. So you can imagine we have thousands of different ecosystems, we have millions of different species, and they are forming interactions, very diverse interactions with possibilities unimaginable because there are just so many of them. And they are really more or less endless, especially when we also go on a molecular level, considering the interactions between genes, between molecules and genes, and so on and so on. All of this, in a scientific term, we call interactome, and it's a little bit represented with this network, which I have drawn here. So this is what we need to imagine biodiversity like in its state. Yeah, lots of interactions in very different environments and between different species. Why is this important? Because these interactions are actually determining something very essential for us. They're building, they're binding, they're destructing, they're rebuilding, they're releasing and innovating. All of this leads to certain products. An important product for all of us is oxygen. I mean, without oxygen, we would have a little bit of difficulties to breathe. But there are also others. There are toxins, but there are also antibiotics. There's CO2 produced, there's nitrogen produced, and so on and so on. And all of this is part of what we call ecosystem services, or a similar term is nature-based solutions. So these interactions lead to those products which we actually use as the human society. And the ecosystem services are very diverse. There are most easily understandable the provisioning ecosystem services. That's about food, about raw materials, about medical resources and freshwater. There are also regulating ecosystem services with air quality, climate regulations, and many others, which you can see down here. And then there is also supporting services, the nutrient cycling, photosynthesis, which is the basis of much of the energy storage on Earth, and soil formation. And then also finally, there are cultural ecosystem services, which are important for our mental and physical health, also for recreation and ecotourism. I mean, if we don't have any biodiversity around, where would we go? So these are ecosystem services, and they are extremely important also for everything which is even closer to us, like any kind of herbs with the vitamins which we need. We have trees which give us timber, food, and so on. We have the cash crops, we have intercropping, we have the animals, the farm animals, but then also birds which control pests, bees and other pollinators which pollinate plants. All of these are ecosystem services without which we would not have any life on Earth. These are all the result of these interactions in biodiversity between different species, but we are losing those species. Since 1970, I can share with you, that's the year I was born, we lost 60% of biodiversity on the planet. This is an enormous amount. Maybe some would say, well, yeah, but I lost already 60% of my stock market. I'm still alive. Well, it's not that easy with biodiversity, unfortunately, because this is the network, the interactome I have shown you before, which leads to those products which we are using. But with the loss of biodiversity, we are changing this network. And it might look more like this, where many interactions have actually vanished. So with this, all the production of the all the production, sorry, is reduced, is strongly reduced, and this will mean that all the ecosystem services I have shown you before will not be available in the same extent than they are now. So this is a problem. Some of the consequences, for example, are if we are losing more CO2 binding capacities due to loss of trees, for example, we can increase further the climate change impacts, because this is, climate change is mainly driven by CO2. So we will see further increases of temperatures. If we lose nutrient cycling, we will have a shortage in timber, we will have shortage in food. If we lose natural pest controls, we will see an increase of invasive species, parasites, and pathogens. And if we lose pure air and water, well, our quality of life will definitely not be the same anymore. So these are many different aspects of biodiversity and the risks biodiversity loss poses to our own life. A more actual topic at the moment are, of course, zoonoses. It's a simple but actually a complex example, because zoonoses are something which is not so easy to understand in its whole extent. Zoonoses are those pathogens which can jump over from animals to humans and then cause, for example, chikungunya, dengue fever, Lassa fever, Ebola, or the SARS. So these are all rather important zoonoses, and they are the result because we have destabilized the biodiversity, and the biodiversity is nothing else than the interaction between human, animal, and the environment. And we need to understand that the health of us humans is very much dependent on environmental health as much as animal health. All of this is strongly interconnected. And if there is an unbalance somewhere here, the whole system will falter and will have difficulties to provide us with what we are used to. This is, for example, also the case with an increasing number of fungi, parasites, protozoans, viruses, and bacteria. We see an increase since the 1980s. And this, of course, puts more and more pressure and gives more and more possibilities of spillovers, of zoonoses, spillovers from the animal to humans. And this is something which is very closely related to biodiversity loss and the destruction of our environment. Why? Ecosystems and hosts have something in common. They have something what we have as an immune response. Don't worry, I'm not going into details about all of those details in regard to the immune system, but all of you know what your immune system does. It's helping you to fight off pathogens. So there are barriers, innate responses, and acquired responses. The acquired responses, for example, from vaccines. So these are things which are there for helping us to survive. We find the same categories in ecosystems. We find barriers, which can be physical, biological, and chemical. We find innate responses because we have production of antibiotics, proteins, and metabolites in ecosystems. And we have adaptive responses to impacts from the outside. So with our actions, we are weakening the ecosystem immune responses. It's the same then with us. When we are stressed, our immune system doesn't work the same way. So this is exactly the same in ecosystems. It just takes a little longer because ecosystems don't work the same way than we do. It takes maybe years, maybe centuries, but still the impacts will be there or are already there. A part of this immune response are also the microorganisms, which we call microbiomes when we are talking about communities of microorganisms, including bacteria, yeast, fungi, protists, and archaea bacteria. And they are everywhere. We can find them in the environment, in different parts of the environment. We can find them in ponds, in the water phase. We can find them in the biofilm, which is the sedimentation on the surface of rocks, of lakes, and so on and so on. But you can find them as well in your gut and on your skin. So these microbes and those microbiomes are everywhere, and they are driving important responses. They help the host to adapt to the environment, because when we don't have these gut microorganisms, we will have quite a bit of difficulties to digest our food. So it's also important for the host health and for all the physiological functions of our body, and of course that of any animal and plant. Similarly, the microbiome is also important for the ecosystem stability, for ecosystem health, and for ecological functions, which means without microbiome, we don't have nutrient cycling, we don't have energy fluxes between different elements, and we don't have CO2 sequestration. All of this is part of the immune response, and it's extremely important to understand this because microbiomes are actually connecting everything together, because they are part of the environment as much as of hosts like us, like any kind of animal species. And here we need to understand that zoonoses are present everywhere globally, but they are particularly present in human-dominated ecosystems. That means that especially in those environments, in those ecosystems which we are impacting heavily, we will be more probable to get in touch with the zoonosis than in pristine ecosystems. What we do to the planet is we change lush forests into cities, grasslands into urban landscapes, deserts into agricultural lands. This is where rodents can thrive. They amplify their abundance, and rodents are a big problem in regard to zoonosis. They can transfer, for example, the Chagas disease in regard if you look at rats, for example. So this is something which we need to consider, that whatever we do impacts on the environment, but will come back to us, maybe in the form of zoonosis. What we also need to understand is biodiversity loss is not linear. It jumps. Why does it jump? It's simple, because biodiversity, each species has a certain area and certain conditions under which it is well, and to which it can buffer. But once this buffer capacity has been surpassed, once the threshold has been surpassed, the species will go extinct, and will go extinct very quickly. So in the graph I'm showing you here from a recent paper as well, we are somewhere here. So keep in mind we have already a 60% loss, but the increase of temperatures will be more and more quickly. And with these increases, we will see jumps, and some cases heavy jumps, where we will lose a huge amount of biodiversity. This is different in different environments, but the jumps will be there in any case. So it's not a dark, I don't want to transfer a dark image. There is still things we can do. But we need to be aware that environmental health is linked to our own health. So we need to make our environment healthy again by reducing climate change impacts, by reducing pollution, and by making us ready to adapt our lifestyle. We need to do that. And what every one of you can do, if you have space somewhere, plant trees. They will help to bind CO2. So we will have less of temperature increases. Reduce your carbon footprint. Think, do I need to do this trip or not? Can I do it from home? Whatever. Consume less and consume locally. This will also reduce your carbon footprint. And please realize that money does not have any nutritional value. This is something I've heard when I was a young boy, and it's still so very true. And we need to understand that everything is connected. And only when we understood this, we might be becoming ready to do something about it. But time is running out, so we need to do something fast. With that, I thank you for your attention. And I would like to draw your attention to a guide which has been produced by AXA Research Fund on biodiversity at risk. You can download it from their website. Thank you very much, and back to you, Juliette.
Yeah, thank you very much, Dirk. It was very interesting and give us really the key elements to understand this broad topic, as you said earlier, which is very key for everyone, and that should make it to the top of the agenda. Dirk, I can't see you anymore.
Oh, that's not good. That means my my camera has a problem. Maybe I can only try to stop and restart my camera in the hope it works.
Yes, here you are. Here you are again. Thank you very much. So as I told earlier, we have some questions from the audience. So first one is, how can we best manage the climate and biodiversity emergencies at the same time?
Yes, well, I mean, I have given already one indication. We need to plant trees wherever we find space. This is something which is really extremely important, and it's a very nice way out. We need to get the CO2 out of the atmosphere, and by planting trees, we also create new environments where biodiversity can thrive. But we need also to create sanctuaries. We have seen that protecting and trying to protect areas is a nice thing, but there are very few untouched ecosystems left, and we need to really protect them. We need to stop habitat degradation, because habitat degradation is one of the biggest risks for biodiversity, or the biggest driver of biodiversity loss, and also actually of climate change, because we are exploiting and we are emitting CO2 in the same regard. And I have to say, one of the biggest problems we are actually facing is the human population growth. Because if we would be 1 million people, we could pollute as we do at the moment. But unfortunately, we are 8 billion people. And that makes the scale much different. And this is, of course, then leading to quite important societal problems.
Sure. Thank you, Dirk. I think your camera is off again.
I can try the same trick again.
Great, and it works. It works. Thank you for that first answer, which is again very interesting. The second one is, in your opinion, what is the role of the private and the public sectors, respectively, in helping to achieve some sort of targets?
Well, there are targets already. I mean, there are many targets. The the SDGs, the Sustainable Development Goals from the United Nations, the Aichi targets. These are important targets, and the public sector as well as the private sector just needs to consider them. And while trying to meet those targets, many of the problems will be solved because the UN targets are very large, because part of the problem is the poverty. We need to master the poverty. We need to have a profound change of our society. And of course, we need also to support research and innovation. So both sides have actually the same duties. They need to find ways forward in making a profound change to our society. And if the private sector is not doing the innovation by themselves, well, it's up to the public sector to reinforce it. I mean, we have seen that with the plastic bags, and it was very easy afterwards for the private sector to change. So these are the things we really need to work together, and I hope it's not going without pressure. It's going without pressure, and that we stop the unsustainable exploitation we are doing. And the public sector might also be able to drive a mental revolution, which we need. Mental revolution in regard to taking over responsibility, adapting our lifestyle, and this needs to go through training and to education. So this is something where especially the public sector is asked to do something and to improve the current situation.
Great. Speaking of targets, are there any targets like we have for climate change to attain a specific conservancy goal? Broad question as well.
Well, it's an easy and a tough question, because as said before, we have the Aichi targets, we have the Sustainable Development Goals. When those are really fully met, we will not have the same problems. But at the moment, they are not met, and that's the issue. People still push them away, politicians and so on, because people don't want to take over that responsibility. Even now, in a crisis, in a medical crisis, so to say, where we talk about deaths, human deaths, people are not able to simply put up a mask and keep distance, or stop partying and so on and so on. So this is the kind of change which we need, because what people need to understand, that climate change and biodiversity loss are slow motion catastrophes. They are going very slowly, so it's difficult for a human to perceive them in the way. But simply talk to your elders and ask them, how was biodiversity when they were young? And then you make the link. And this should trigger something in your mind, and this should help you to evolve and make a step in the right direction together, because we need to do that together. It's not the responsibility of a single person or a single nation. It's a responsibility of every single one of us.
Sure. Thank you for this message. Would you have, to conclude this webinar, would you have an ending thought that you would like to share with the audience, to make sure that our audience keep that in mind in their daily life?
Well, there are many things I would want to say, but just don't despair. There is hope, yeah. but we need to do something together, and we need to take over responsibility.
Great. Well, thank you very much, Dirk. It was fascinating to listen to you. Thank you to our audience for joining us, and see you next time.
Yeah, and sorry for the technical issues, but that's the life of teleconferences. Thank you again for the possibility to talk to this audience, and I will be very happy to answer questions you have, and you can send them either through Juliette or you send an email to me. I'm very happy to respond to them as quickly as I can. With that, I thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, dear. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.